Credit rating agency Fitch has warned South Africa that a failure to address the country's electricity crisis over the medium term could add downward pressure on its current rating of the country. The country's rating currently stands at BB-. Fitch has noted President Cyril Ramaphosa's interventions announced during the State of the Nation address. The president announced the appointment of an electricity minister, as well as the declaration of a national state of disaster over the energy crisis. Fitch says that these measures could strengthen government's capacity to better deal with the crisis, but it also noted that a generally poor track record on the execution of plans, Eskom's past governance issues, as well as the pending departure of current CEO Andre de Ruyter, suggests that the issues may not be dealt with as speedily as hoped. Fitch has also warned that the current electricity crisis could reduce its forecast view for the economy growing at 1.1%, which it worries may undermine the government's fiscal consolidation efforts. Well, for more on this, we're now joined via Zoom by Senior Research Fellow and Political Economist at the trade collective Lebohang Pheko. Thank you so much for joining us. Always good to talk to you. The economy needs to be powered, I guess, and so when we don't have power, the drama is that the economy will continue to shrink. Are you encouraged at all by hearing the news of the outsourcing of power to the grid?
So I think it's complicated. I think the one is that we, as a country, we haven't been able to really use and adjust and to perhaps transition really effectively to the multiple sources of alternative energy that are available to us. And this is an often cited lament, that we have wind, we have solar capacity, we have sunshine, and we also have tidal energy, being a coastal nation that is also available to us. But that also takes a lot of infrastructure. It would take billions of rands of investment to enable us to transition to those sorts of power sources. But in the meantime, I think in the context of what has been said by Fitch perhaps is one of the gentler credit ratings agencies. And I think that that's probably why there has been a bit of concern that even Fitch seems to be slightly pessimistic or, not as sanguine as they might be about South Africa's credit prospects. And I think all three of the majors, as they are called, have indicated that they're not very optimistic. I think as early as last year, they were not very optimistic about the prospects of South Africa being able to lift its veracity in terms of a credit destination and an investor destination as a result of the energy shedding until about 2024. So they seem to be braced for that. I think that said, I think it's also very important that we shouldn't, I am of the view that we should not always be overly alarmed by what credit ratings agencies say. I mean, I've personally written in the past about that, that I think that they wield way too much voice, way too much influence over our democratic processes, over our policy decisions, and sometimes even over our political space. And I do also think that it's also important to rethink how we are orientating our approach to the energy transition, rather than trying to think through how to appease external forces. And lastly, to say that even though the B minus negative, double B negative that Fitch has given, I think that the three are in tandem. That would be Fitch, S&P, and Moody's. It's also important to say that that doesn't mean that a country cannot per se pursue any investment opportunities, since we have decided that we're going to pursue these very neoliberal, very market orthodox, global trade architecture, and try to pursue these sorts of models. I don't think that then that should be the thing that really makes us feel nervous as a country, because many countries are able to function very well. I'm not saying that we should be encouraged to continue free falling, but I do think that we should. I'm cautioning us not to be overly pessimistic. Many people are able to borrow, even in junk status, and grow their economies. Brazil has done it. Venezuela has done it. Several other countries have done it. It just means that the return on investment investment, and the risk is viewed as higher. But it doesn't mean to say that our investment opportunities are completely dead or are completely diminished.
All right, we'll unpack a lot of what you've said just now. Fascinating. There is one line in their report that talks about South Africa not having a great track record in terms of execution of plans. They said at last year's SONA, the electricity story was on the table, and not much has happened since, and in fact things have gotten worse. So for whatever else is said and whatever power they yield, could there be an element of truth here, or do you think that there's something different happening with this energy plan now? Otherwise, we're going to be talking about the same things this time next year.
Yeah, I mean, now we have the renewable energy power produce. It's a very long thing, but you know, the renewable energy power procurement or production program, which was launched a few weeks ago as well at the Department of Minerals and Energy. It does seem as though there's a lack of continuity around our energy plan and our energy grid. Our energy strategy, actually. We're not also very good at practicing energy diplomacy, even though we have excellent relations, I think, in this regard with countries like Botswana, like Zambia, like Kenya, even Lesotho. And at some stage, I think not as recently as a few months ago, it was stated that, in fact, those countries seem to have a surplus of energy, of electricity, which this country was thinking of procuring. Remember that this also comes off the back of a situation where we have been either selling electricity surpluses in the past at cost or even below cost to neighboring countries. So I do think that this is a good time to practice different kinds of energy diplomacy where we see ourselves, particularly in the SADC region, as part of a whole, as mutually dependent and codependent in the best possible way. We see this also in that there's a strong nexus between the energy crisis and the climate crisis, as we see, the flooding in Mozambique, which is now coming over into, which is leaking, as it were, into provinces like Mpumalanga, and we see the torrential rain, which in and of itself need not be a disaster if we had a really good electric and water management system, where these kinds of surpluses would, rather than being viewed as a flood, would be viewed as a surplus that could be used for future. In the same way, for the times that we have excess sunshine, the sunny days that we enjoy, the days on the beach, we would rather find ways of corralling that into a storage system. And I think that to just finesse the point as well, we've been asked as South Africans to begin to, invest in solar energy at domestic level. But Peter and the viewers, we know that this is extremely expensive. I mean, it takes, tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands to completely transition even a household from the electricity grid to the solar grid. So I do think that the state would do well to be a lot less tone deaf in the very real difficulties that are happening at domestic level, and also encourage much greater investment, both private and different forms of investment into the energy grid. But I do think that we need a much greater regional approach. So in short, yes, we do lack continuity. We already have a SADC energy plan. We already have a SADC climate plan, for example. The African Union is also full of excellent ideas. The African Development Bank actually has developed some of the most interesting, most cutting edge and avant-garde energy experimental policies out there. But none of these seem to be domesticated, and none of these seem to be finding any traction on the ground. We seem to be rather content with recreating different policy models which are not to great effect at all.
All right, so the day can be saved if we do the right things. The Fitch report talks about we have some headroom on this BB minus to deal with the temporary impacts. How long is temporary? At what point will it become too much for them to bear and they say, look, we have to downgrade you further?
Yeah, so I mean, we've been in the threat of being sent to the naughtiest of the naughty corner for a long time. So that would be CCC grade, which is, of course, just one or two beneath the B minus that we are at now. I want to repeat that I do think it's very unfortunate that we give credit ratings agencies this much oxygen. But I also want to say that we are not the only country over the last 12 months, even the only African country who have been having these sorts of dialogues with credit ratings. So I think, over the last 12 months, I think that Fitch has pronounced on Kenya, on Nigeria, on Ghana, and one or two others, and said that they were getting, very close to debt saturation. In the same time span, they have also lifted the credit ratings agencies for credit rating scores. I beg your pardon, for Gabon in particular, particularly because of the oil price surpluses. But as we know, commodities, anything that's based on commodities is extremely fickle. And I think that's been one of the problems as well in South Africa, is that to all intents and purposes, even though we have a very diverse economy, in some respects, we are over-reliant on commodities. We are still over-reliant on our, the great dividend that we have of natural resources, particularly gold and platinum and diamonds and so forth. And as a result of this, the worst part of that, of course, is that these prices are not set in this country. And, there's a whole historical context and a colonial context to why that is, but why it is that even, coffee, wheat, and all of these things, the prices for that are set in New York and so forth. But that also means that we don't have as much autonomy as we could have over these oil prices and over these mineral prices, which means that it's very difficult to anticipate how long this is going to last, right? So we need to rely on the variables that are within our control. And there are different sectors of the economy which can be supported, such as small, medium enterprises where, the majority of employment takes place, such as the manufacturing sector, which is less prone to the vagaries of external markets, car manufacturing, computer, laptop manufacturing. And again, as with many things, we have an excellent industrial development plan, and IPAP 1 and IPAP 2, which speak to building artisanal infrastructure and artisanal capacity in this country. Another much neglected area is the agricultural sector, especially the small-scale agricultural sector, again, of artisanal farmers and so forth. And one of the things that we saw during the COVID pandemic was that we all kept on eating, didn't we? And that, the agricultural sector was still buoyant. So let us do the things that we can do and do those as well as possible.
Lebohang, always good to talk to you. I wish we could carry on with this conversation, but we'll have to leave it for another day. But thanks for your insights tonight, as always.